So I feel like I need at least a dozen in storage. Alright, so just kind of painting in my shadows here. Putting the dark color on the bottom. And then we'll put it down. Oh, oh no! Blorf. Complete blorf. So we're going to get all of the bottom areas of these feathers, and we're going to get the areas between them. And the way we're going to highlight these is actually the way I usually highlight red. We're going to use underpainting and a glaze. So for those who are following my latest thing on the Patreon about glazing, we're going to be using that underpainting application on this. I usually do it on red if I don't want my highlights to go too pink. But yeah, I just put up my companion PDF to the glazing video for fundamentals. Fundamentals video will go live on my regular YouTube if you're not on my Patreon. But you can also be a free member on my Patreon. My Patreon does have the capacity for you to sign up free. The only thing you really get is you get my general and updates, and you do get early access to these fundamentals videos because everybody on my Patreon gets early access to the fundamentals. But hey, I've got a free level, so if you want to always know and get early access to them, because I'm going to start breaking it down now, I think, for these fundamentals. Everything has been very general up to now, but now I can actually like go into a bit more detail on very specific granular things. Yes, glazing is wonderful. It's one of my favorite techniques, and David hardly uses it. I think David is just, because he's a wet palette painter, when he does use it, it tends to be a lot stronger than when I use it, and so he doesn't reach for it as often as I do. Because for him, it has the capacity to wipe out work, which is something I talk about in that video, and in the PDF. If you have a heavy glaze, you can really wipe out your previous work. But yeah, that's my kind of beast, glazing is, and it's just not David's kind of beast. Alright, so I'm going to take this shadow, and I'm going to put it down the kind of crease in the middle of the ribbon here, just to shade that a bit more. And we'll put it down the center here too. And then when we bring up our highlights, they will pop a bit more because of the contrast. Okay, good. Oh, yeah. It certainly dries lighter. When you thin paint, to any extent, it's going to dry lighter than it looks wet. Using mediums can help with that. But then you have to use mediums, which I hate to use with glazes. I don't like how they change them. But that said, you could try it. However, some mediums may cause faster drying, but some of them will slow it down. So you have to kind of experiment and figure it out. All right, let's just get our white and our clear red. Gotta keep pulling my shoulders back and my neck to make sure that I'm not like screwing myself up again. So easy when you sit and paint to like do the hunched over thing, and then you're making your neck all sad. So for textures with white, or for underpainting with white, it's going to be between a 2:1 and 1:1. I think I'm going to do a 1:1. If I'm trying to kind of smooth blend a little bit or not make it like totally bold texture, then I'm going to be closer to 1:1 with my paint to water on my pure white. If I'm going for a bold underlying texture that I want to glaze over but still leave that texture, I'm going to go closer to 2:1 paint to water. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, glazing, that's what glazing is for. Like, shifting color in subtle ways and disguising transitions. It's the real way you get blends. You can do so much with layering. You can get really close with layering, and with wet blending. So let's try this out and see how bad it is. I'm going to try to hit these little feather bits. Yep. And I can hit them. See? So if you... These are sculpted a little bit too close together to really just do a... like the side of your brush technique. But if you just don't even pay attention to where the ridges actually are toward the top here and just do the brush stroke that's in the right direction, you'll hit most of them. But I just want to hit the outside edge of this really. So that's going to highlight that, but you can see how it's making it look pink. But we'll get rid of that in a second. Do some glazes and see if I can just get rid of it with a clear red. So that's gotten the edges of those feathers. Let's get this guy. Just where the light hits it. Now let's get our clear red. Cool, Thormel. Yeah, glazing is one of my key, I always use it kind of things. But as I said, some painters really don't, or if they do, they only spot glaze, and I mean, it's hard to do with a wet palette. So if I'm doing a glaze on the wet palette, I'm almost always spot glazing in sections. All right, I'm gonna put 1 drop, 2 drops of water into this clear red, 4 drops. Boop, boop. So I want this red, this is clear red, so it will thin down and get kind of translucent, but I want it pretty strong because I want it to color the top of those white bits. Oh no, you can use inks to glaze, it's just, and they work just fine. You have to add quite a bit of water. You still need to hit the right consistency, Kodiak, but I mean, acrylic inks are just washes anyway. Like, they're heavy washes. So you just add more water or some glazing medium if you like mediums, and it just makes a glaze. So yeah, if you need super intense ink, super intense glaze, like to intensify a red on a cape or something, you could absolutely reach for those acrylic inks, the Daler-Rowney stuff. Don't use artist inks, the dyes, because if you try to do any work over the top of them, it's gonna bleed. I mean, just keep in mind that artist inks, like Daler-Rowney, are paint. They're just thinned paint. They're not inks. Inks these days, those artist inks are just paint. That's just a finer pigment in a slightly different base type. That's all it is. So it's not like they're different. They're not a different beast. They call them inks, but they're not inks. That's why they call them acrylic inks. Acrylic ink means this is really just thinned acrylic paint, but the pigment is so fine that it acts like an ink, but it's not going to bleed on you. That's why acrylic ink is a thing. Whereas artist inks, which are dyes in lacquer, like some of the Winsor & Newton calligraphy inks, most of the calligraphy inks, fountain pen inks, those suckers are going to be dyes in a lacquer base, an acrylic-based lacquer base, but still. So those are going to be a different beast than the Daler-Rowney acrylic inks. So now we've got this white underpainting on these feathers. We're going to pop some of this clear red over the top in a glaze. Since it's a small area, I'm just going to spot glaze. So I'm not going to leave a lot of pooling. Just going to do a real quick hit. I'm going to rinse out my brush, wipe it off, get some of the water out of it, go back, and where I do see a little bit of pooling, I'm going to pull it off. But yeah, the only difference with acrylic inks came about because of the textile industry. Acrylic inks essentially came about because dyes are fugitive, and the textile industry was like, you know what, I wish we could just make pigments, which are not nearly so fugitive and which have better light fastness. I wish we could convince these pigments to bond to fibers just like dyes do. So essentially they messed around with the chemistry until they got that. And that's how the acrylic ink became a thing. So chemically, if you try to like put them on something, they probably are higher staining, like as far as fabrics. So be careful when you use them. If you get them on your clothes, good luck getting some of that out, depending on the pigment. But in general, they're just a super fine pigment because they had to essentially like work with these super fine pigments in order to get the particulate, like the dye effect, right? Because before, artists were like more about like coverage, like intrinsic coverage based on what the pigment was, and the superfine pigments weren't really like that. Why would they be in demand, right? But when the hobby industry came along and then the textile industry came along and went, we need a much finer grind, and we're going to chemically mess with it, and the hobby industry was like, ooh, we like these, they're very transparent, we can do washes with these and inks and things like that. That all of these industries cross-pollinate each other. Sometimes it takes a long time, but it happens. I found a paper directly talking about the origins of the acrylic ink and how the textile industry essentially shifted away from using traditional dyes into using these treated acrylic dyes that are not really dyes. So does it matter? Not really, but just keep in mind that an acrylic ink is really just a superfine pigment wash. And it's, although it has like the superfine pigment in common, like it's still not fully soluble. See, this is the thing with actual inks, with calligraphy inks, traditional artist inks, dyes are fully soluble in water, but a pigment will always be particulate. So the only way you can get that translucency with a pigment is to make it super fine particle, so it lets a lot of light through. So that's why that's why they are super fine if they're trying to get close to the effect of dyes but not be fully soluble, because they just can't make a pigment fully dissolve in water. But yeah, so don't go thinking those De La Rowney inks are really much different from a standard paint. They're in a slightly different base, and they're a super fine pigment. They're not a different beast than the paint you use every day. They are a slightly altered beast. So whenever you ask yourself things like, well, I wonder if these acrylic inks can do X, the answer is, well, can paint do X? And if paint can do X, they can do X. Did we have a blip? Or did Pendrake have a blip? Doing a little bit of highlight here on the upper edge. Pendrake did. I don't remember, Polly. That's been a while and I've slept since then. But I do this technique a lot because this is how you get like a good highlight on red without it going pink for me. So now I can get that highlight, but it stays overall more red. Oh, anonymous gifter giving Twisted Oma a sub. Thank you, anonymous gifter. So now that we've done that underpainting, we can see the details on the feathers here, but they still look red, right? So this is a way to get around that whole, when you highlight red with white, it tends to go pink thing. Yeah, the pirate bus. It's just, it's hard. Without Reaper investing in its resources in its own resin shop, it's very hard for Reaper to produce a resin item number with consistency, just because if we're relying on Trenchworks for our resin, and Trenchworks does a great job, but they're also like way booked. So it's not like if Reaper was able to put resources into their own resin shop, then they would just be able to turn around and produce a few, right? But we can't do that when we're relying on a different company for sourcing that sort of thing. But it also saves Reaper a lot of resources, right? Because they don't have to run their own resin shop. So this is what I'm doing actually, Time Buster, is I am doing an underpainting of white first and then putting the red over the top. And then the other thing, I mean, if you have to use white to highlight your red, then this is the way to do it. You can also get a really bright red by highlighting up with orange and yellow, like super, super bright. Because then you're using saturated colors to highlight the red, so it tends to look like a brighter red. But yeah, so I'm doing white underpainting. See how I did the white here? Real thinned white, so I'm not doing a big bold line. Then I'm taking a thinned clear red, and clear red is the most saturated pure red pigment we have. And I'm painting it, it's thinned, it's like kind of wash consistency, or it's a heavy glaze. And I'm painting it over the white. So that will give you a brighter red. See how bright that edge got? Yep. I'm here to answer questions. This is why we do this stream. I know all the tricks. I've been painting for decades at this point. Or if I don't know all the tricks, it takes me very little time to run out and learn a new one. Despite being an old dog. But yeah, underpainting is your answer for this. It also lets you get really precise highlights if you're doing textures by doing the underpainting. So just do that little bit of white. Grab the thinned red. You don't want it super thinned. You want it more like this. You can see how it's fallen off the edge of the palette. It's still pretty fluid. It's still fairly see-through, but it's heavy enough to affect the area under it. But because you are painting with actual red and not pink, even though it is thinned red, it's still going to read more as red than a pink would. Even though the effect of the red going over the white does approach pinkishness. But the eye sees that filter, it's just more red. Like that comes off as more red. And it helps if you also do darker shadows on your red so that the areas where you're painting the white and then the red over them really pop. Because it's next to this shadow that this looks brighter. Yay, Rubicon mouse links. But yeah, so that's how I do it. Time Buster. I do a lot of underpainting. Like underpainting is one of my tools that I use all the time. Underpainting with white to get a brighter or lighter effect or a textured effect is something that I go to a lot. We did a lot. There's also, you can see that white highlight around the edge of this little leather bit. I'm going to take some of that red glaze. And this is an example of where I would use a heavier glaze instead of a really thin one. You could build up a couple of layers if you're not sure on glazing, but you can see how that I still have a highlight. It looks really red, but I've got that highlight on there. So. Oh, we have lots of ReaperCon stuff added to the store, huh? Good. Alrighty, so let me get my... I was going to do some gold. I'm still looking at these little potions and thinking I might... Not sure what color that little pot is going to be yet. Might have to just go black with the pot and pale blue with the potion bottle. Let's just do that. I think we were using Hobgoblin blue on her, so to build the blue for that potion bottle, the pale blue, if I want it to be kind of a transparent glass look. Plus it's got blue behind it. Then I'm gonna grab this blue and add some white to it. So Hobgoblin is the blue that we used on her dress. Quite a few of the stuff, yeah. Alright, let's put some blue down, get some white. Let's see if I can make this go to a color that I would call glass. Yeah, the Reaper Sophie is really intricate this year. So my blue is probably a bit strong here, so I'm going to flip it over to here, grab more white. There we go, now we're getting there. That's looking pretty good. That's a good kind of a sky color. That's what I normally want if I'm going to do glass. Nice Kodiak. Yeah, usually, I mean, if you want something from ReaperCon that you can't get without going to ReaperCon, there are plenty of friendly people in our community who will snag one for you if you reach out. There we go. All right, so let's do this color. I'm going to strengthen my white a little bit now that I'm not doing texture with it. I actually want it to make a highlight. Flip-flop these guys. Pardon me? Yeah, there. I'd switch my drinks around now that my tea is empty. And my other drinky thing is not empty. Ah. Got a little bit pushed off. I totally forgot Kodiak. In all of the crazy of the trip, I totally forgot on the miniatures den. My brain can only hold so much, and there was just too much stress regarding my ReaperCon trip this year to remember fun stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, it's all great, like, but yeah, I forgot. Because it'd be what it be. Without somebody to remind me, I was not going to remember that. To be honest, I hope I never have a ReaperCon as stressful as this one was again. The road trip and the puppy and everything. It was pretty terrible. I can say that now that I've gotten through it, but I was definitely dreading it for a reason, and I would not do it again. Yeah, it was It was just too much, guys. I feel like after that trip makes me not want to go anywhere. And David's like, but Hawaii. And I'm like, Hawaii's going to be an exception because we're flying there. There will be no Kiki to wrestle, you know. But I have another road trip coming up because I committed to going to the Shiloh Shepherd Nationals, which are in Colorado this year, which is a 2.5-day road trip for me with Kiki. So it's 1 day less. And I don't know that I'm going to stay the full period of time. But I promised Bridget I would bring Kiki out for the Nationals, so I'm doing it. But after that, guys, I swear I'm not going anywhere for 6 months. Like, nothing. Zilch, zero. No travel. I feel like whenever I do, they are not one of, I don't think they're one of ours, Kodiak. Different Shiloh breeders belong to different organizations. There's mostly just 2 organizations now, breed clubs. Ours and the ISSDC. The old one that was made, that we came from, that the breed founder started, has mostly crashed and burned, which is kind of why we left. But keep in mind that their goals are not our goals. So you will not... they don't have a breeder training program. They are much more AKC show focused. Like they don't necessarily want to join the AKC, but their breed is about like breeding for the breed standard. They don't put as much of an emphasis on health. Their breeders don't cooperate as much as ours do. I mean, they do. There are still people in that organization that are very health oriented. So I don't want to say that, but you know, it's just different. Like all of the people in my org, we all work together. We all communicate. It makes a big difference, I think. So over there, I wouldn't know who is a good breeder and who's not a good breeder, I guess is what I'm trying to tell you. Personal battery depleted, everyone go away. Yeah, that's what I hit, pretty much, Slayer. That's pretty much. So yeah, be aware. Just be aware that, you know, look at who is... Because we're ISSA. And I don't think they are ours. There are some new breeders, so I have to double check that. But I don't think so. Like, when in doubt, if you go to shiloh-shepherd.com and go to our Find Your Shiloh breeders, Echo, Guardian, Jewel, Legacy, Mainzer, Moonshine, Opal, Pacific Wild, Praetorian, Sentinel, Silver Moon, Sooner, Stormrunner, Supernova... Wicked is a new one. Wilderness Kennels. Yeah, so Starry Night's not on our list. But it's just like in the AKC, you don't know who is a good breeder or not. You have to do your research. So if you go with a breeder that, you know, that I can't vet for you, then essentially you're on your own. It's not that you won't get a good dog. Maybe you will. But it's just I can't guide you in that one because I don't keep up with them. TSSR. Yep, ISSDC. Yep. So yeah, that's the org that we don't... That's not our org. And each org just has different goals, right? Like, that's the thing. They have different goals for the breed in different ways. Like, they don't do UC Davis. So they're not working with the Genetic Diversity Project, which doesn't matter to some people, right? So it's all your goal as far as a dog owner. It's what you're looking for. Maybe you don't care as much about that stuff. I care, but it doesn't mean everybody cares. Caught you as a painted dragon. Good. Wait. Oh yeah, the Scribe is would be a good cosplay. Oh! Good, you got a big Sophie. Yay! Cornico, yay! Yeah, it's just, you know, yeah, like, it's the reason why I wouldn't go with any other breed, I think, because I looked at Australian cattle dogs after Kiri passed. I was really feeling the lack of a Kiri. But I just ended up, like, getting frustrated because I couldn't tell who was a good breeder and who wasn't. And it makes a difference to me, so. But yeah, I mean... Go your path, like, It's your decision. It's always your decision. Alrighty. Also, Kodiak, one thing you always want to do as well is to, I hate to say this is weird, but search for the breeder you're looking at. Search for them on the Better Business Bureau, or do a general search for their kennel name. Because there are some dicey people out there breeding dogs, right? So you wanna be warned before